Money. It's got to be one of the most important inventions in all of human history, right? It's shaped entire societies, it's built empires, and it's what drives so much of our world today. So we're going to go on a pretty wild journey to see how we went from, say, trading goats for vegetables to trading bits of code on the internet. But first, let's start with a really simple question that's actually kind of profound. Why is this piece of paper in your wallet worth anything? I mean, really think about it. It's just paper and ink. How do we all agree that this thing, or even just some numbers on a screen, actually has value? Answering that is the key to the whole story. Okay, so before there was money, there was just stuff, and people trading their stuff for other people's stuff. It's called bartering, and it's been around forever. We've got records of it from Mesopotamia going back to at least 6000 BCE. On the surface, it sounds simple. I have a chicken, you have bread, let's trade. Easy. Except it wasn't. In reality, bartering is a logistical nightmare, and it's all because of this one single problem with a fancy name, the double coincidence of wants. It sounds complicated, but it just means that for a trade to work, I have to find someone who has the exact thing I want, and that person has to want the exact thing I have. The odds of that lining up perfectly? Not great. Here's a perfect example. Let's say you're a cattle rancher, and you desperately need a new knife. You go down to the blacksmith, he's got plenty of knives. Awesome. But there's a problem. He's a vegan. He has zero interest in your beef. So what happens? Nothing. No trade. You're stuck without a knife, and he's stuck without a customer. And trust me, the headaches do not stop there. What if your goods aren't divisible? You can't exactly trade a tenth of a live goat for a bundle of spinach. And how do you even set prices? Is a clay pot worth 5 fish or 10? Who decides? And of course, a lot of this stuff is heavy, hard to carry around, and it can spoil. Clearly, humanity needed a much, much better system. And that need, that frustration, is what sparked a truly brilliant solution. It was the very first version of what we would call money. The answer was something called commodity money. The idea was simple. Instead of trading anything for anything, an entire society would just agree to use one common object for all trades, an object that everyone believed had some kind of value. This thing becomes the middleman, and just like that, the whole double coincidence of wants problem completely solved. And what's so cool is that this idea popped up all over the world, but with totally different objects. In parts of Africa and Asia, cowrie shells were super popular. They were small, they were durable, and you couldn't really fake them. In Mesopotamia, they used barley. And in Alor, Indonesia, they used these incredible bronze drums called moko, which were seen as really precious. But my favorite example has got to be salt. In ancient Rome, salt was incredibly valuable, mostly for preserving food. It was so valuable, in fact, that Roman soldiers were often paid part of their wages in salt. This payment was called a salarium, and that is the direct origin of our modern word salary. So next time you get paid, you can thank the Romans and their love of salt. Now, commodity money was a huge leap forward, but it wasn't perfect. I mean, weighing out piles of barley or counting thousands of tiny shells for every single purchase was still pretty tedious. So the next big innovation was all about making money easy, standardized, portable, and simple to divide. And you can really see the progression over time. It started in Mesopotamia with the shekel, which wasn't a coin at first, just a standard unit of weight. Then, way later, the Kingdom of Lydia created the first actual stamped coins. And centuries after that, we get the invention of paper money in China. Every step just made trade a little bit faster, a little bit easier. Those Lydian coins were a total game changer. See, by stamping a piece of gold with the king's official seal, the government was basically guaranteeing its weight and purity. And this is so important. People no longer had to bring scales to the market to weigh and test the metal for every single purchase. You could just trust the coin. That sped up commerce like you wouldn't believe. And then came paper. In China, merchants who were tired of hauling around massive amounts of heavy metal coins started using promissory notes, basically official IOUs, called jiaozi. These pieces of paper just represented a certain amount of coin held safely somewhere else. Eventually, the government took over, printed them in standard amounts, and boom. The world's first paper currency was born. All because it's just way easier than carrying a bag of metal. And this is where the story gets really weird and abstract. Because the move from a heavy coin to a flimsy piece of paper marked the beginning of the biggest conceptual leap in the history of money. We started to separate the idea of value from an actual physical object. Okay, let's break this down. Step 1. A Lydian coin had intrinsic value. Its worth quite literally was the gold it was made of. Step 2. Early paper money had representative value. The paper itself was worthless, but it was a promise, a claim check you could trade in for actual gold or silver. And step 3, where we are now, fiat value. The dollar in your pocket has value, well, because we all agree that it does. Fiat money is currency that has value simply because a government declares its legal tender. But really, its value comes entirely from our collective faith and trust in it. A super early example was the Chow from China's Yuan dynasty. It was just paper, not backed by anything physical, and it worked purely because the government backed it and people accepted it. This quote really just sums up the whole mind-bending idea perfectly. Fiat money works because it's a social contract. Its value isn't in the material, it's in our shared belief system. It's a story we all agree to tell ourselves. Now, there's a similar concept called token money. Just like fiat money, its value has nothing to do with what it's made of, but the key difference is that token money is only accepted in a really small, specific area. A classic historical example is the tokens they used on colonial plantations in Indonesia, which workers were paid in and could only spend at the company's store. The absolute easiest way to understand this is to think of an arcade coin. Inside that arcade, that little piece of metal is valuable. It can get you a game of Pac-Man. But the second you walk out the door, it's just a worthless metal disc. That's exactly how token money works. Its value is locked inside a closed system. All right, so that brings us pretty much up to the present day. The fundamental ideas of money, belief, trust, exchange, they haven't really changed, but technology has absolutely launched money into a whole new dimension. In the digital world, we're basically dealing with two major forms of money right now. On one hand, you've got e-money. Think PayPal, GoPay, stuff you probably use all the time. This is controlled by a central authority, like a company or a bank. But on the other hand, you have cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, which is famous for being decentralized. There's no single boss.
And the engine that makes cryptocurrency work is the blockchain. The simplest way to think of it is as a public record book, or a ledger, that's shared across a giant network of computers. Everyone has a copy, and everyone verifies the transactions. This is what makes it possible to send values securely without needing a middleman, like a bank, to sign off on everything. It's a totally different way of establishing trust.
So there you have it, from cowrie shells and bronze drums to gold coins and paper promises, all the way to lines of code flying across the internet. The form of money has constantly radically changed, but that core principle has always been the same. Its value comes from our shared belief. Which leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. What story will we all agree to believe in next?